Hey, welcome back to the Missouri Sports Network, MissouriSportsNetwork.com, where everyone has a home field advantage. Certainly glad you've tuned in. This segment brought to you by the Missouri State Highway Patrol, who reminds us to take that 3 seconds and buckle up. It's 3 seconds that could save your life. Be safe, be smart, and be here tomorrow. Central Bank of the Ozarks, Great Southern Bank, Doak Propane, and Labor's Local 663. Well, pleased to welcome back to the show from STLHighSchoolSports.com, Dave Kvidahl, and I got it right that time.
You did very well. Thank you, guys.
You bet. And for first-time appearance here, we've got from Preps KC, the managing editor, PrepsKC.com, Dion, Clisso, and Mr. Clisso. Hey, welcome to the show. Welcome to the cave. Thank you.
Well, it's exciting to be here. And if you want, anytime you want to talk high school football, Dave knows we've had several late night conversations about the subject. So I don't know if anybody wants to listen to what we have to say, but I'm always willing to talk.
You bet. Well, we'll start with Mr. Kvidahl. You know, as coming out, and we visited last week, about some of the opportunities that in your area with St. Mary's, maybe MICDS, maybe making a run at a state title. Anything surprise you from last week, and has your mind changed about those usual suspects, so to speak?
Not necessarily. I went and watched St. Mary's absolutely dismantle a Cardinal Ritter team we thought around here was pretty good. I mean, they lost a couple of games, but their opponents' combined records, I want to say, going into that St. Mary's game were, I think, 18-0. I mean, they played Jackson. They lost to them. They lost to Lincoln College Prep, who's out in Dion's part of the world, and Joliet Catholic, who's a powerhouse outside of Chicago. So it was like, okay, we understand those three losses came to some really good teams, but St. Mary's just put it to them. They let them get across midfield 3 times, including at the end of the first half, and a 42-0 running clock dismantling that wasn't anywhere close to the way the game was played. I mean, it could have been 100-0 if St. Mary's wanted it to be. They were very impressive. I still think, barring anything unforeseen, like Dion will tell you, that Odessa team out in his part of the world and St. Mary's when they meet, I think that might be the title game, whether it's in the semifinals, whether it's in the championship, wherever they cross paths. I would be surprised if they don't see one another. Cardinal Ritter's got its own problems trying to get out of a district with Lutheran North, who has kind of started to find its way after, again, getting dismantled by a very good MICDS team. So 3 and 4 are pretty interesting around here, with MICDS being our best in Class 4 at the moment. And I know Dion's got a Smithville team that's very interested in seeing those guys again after what happened a couple of years ago. So nothing's really changed so much. I was interested with the DeSmet Rockhurst score, 28-14. I mean, that beating Rockhurst used to be a huge deal. This year, I know the Hawklets aren't what they have been, but that's DeSmet's nicest win this season. They beat a pretty good Edwardsville team week 1, got the doors blown off them by East St. Louis week 2, couldn't hang long enough with CBC in week 3, had proceeded to kind of roll over the dregs of their Metro Catholic Conference. Vianney, who's a team that was very, very good, won 2 titles in a 3-year span recently. Their star standout, Kyron Williams, is currently at Notre Dame doing all kinds of things. Well, they haven't won a game since, I think, September of 2019. They are very, very, they're in some very tough times, shall we say. So that's who, and then DeSmet beat up on a Chaminade team that's okay, but hasn't necessarily lived up to what I thought they would be, in particular with the level of talent they have. They have a St. Louis U High team tonight that's very interested in beating them, but the Junior Bills are going to be without, as they have been, standout Isaac Thompson, the all-around player, but he's primarily a safety, nationally ranked kind of recruit, has committed to Mizzou. He suffered a really nasty knee injury week 3 against Chaminade and is out for the season. So I'm curious to see what a young and interested DeSmet team can do against SLU High tonight, or tomorrow night, I should say, on Friday in Class 6. I still think the winner of the CBC DeSmet game, which if the district doesn't shake out any more than it currently is, could be a semifinal in their district tournament, will probably represent the St. Louis area in the championship game. But Hazelwood Central and Francis Howell will have something to say about that in the other district in Class 6. Class 5, we've got the Holt Indians and a couple of other teams that are trying to figure out if they can make a run. But Holt's been by far and away our best Class 5 squad over here. Class 2, Lutheran St. Charles. they played St. Mary's and they actually scored, which was a bit of a bonus considering how bad they beat Cardinal Ritter the other day. But Lutheran St. Charles hasn't. They're going to have to go through a Duchesne team that beat them last year in the district final to see if they can put together a postseason run in Class 2, because they are still in Class 2. They're still in the same district. And Duchesne, while having lost the regular season game to Lutheran St. Charles and Quincy Notre Dame, they're kind of. I get the impression they're playing the long game to see them again here in November when the chips are on the table. So that's kind of the rundown around these parts for the moment.
And Dion, kind of the same question there. I've noticed, Blue Springs South, that, just haven't been playing very well. And then they're typically teams, and then the Rockhurst, that Dave mentioned, maybe being down just a little bit. Well, who's kind of maybe standing out to you in the Kansas City area?
Well, we'll start right with Class 6. And last week we had Lee Summit North and Liberty North match up, and Liberty North won that game 38-35. A late touchdown kind of made it a little closer there. Lee Summit North did have a lead in the third quarter. I'm going to tell you right now, both those teams are good enough to win a state title. Liberty North is really good, and they're really young, and they're really deep. They've got a kid at middle linebacker who is it's a sophomore, already getting offers from Alabama. May end up being the best player in Kansas to come out of Kansas City in a long time. I think that their only loss has been Bentonville, Arkansas, the first week of the season, and they pretty much handled everybody up until this point. Basically just wore Lee Summit North out in the fourth quarter this last week. Just ran the ball down their throat just because they were a little bit deeper and bigger in some spots. So I think those are the two top dogs there in different districts. And the way the districts shake out this year, they'll be on opposite sides. So it'll be interesting to see how those go. I think it's the CBC and the Lee Summit North district will match up, and then the Francis Howell Hazelwood will match up with Liberty North. So those are two top dogs. But then you got a Park Hill South team that's undefeated, hasn't maybe played the same schedule as those two. They're in a conference level below. I don't know if they've got the horses to do it. You got like a Ray Peck and a Liberty who each have two losses, but it's to Lee Summit North and to Liberty North. They play each other this week, and then so that there's a lot of pretty good teams in Class 6. Blue Springs and Blue Springs South are down for different reasons. Blue Springs South is just not have the size that they need to compete with some of these schools right now. They've got some nice skill players, but they just don't have the size. And the way Liberty and Liberty North and Liberty and Ray Peck and those schools are, you have to have size, or you're not going to be able to stay on the field. Blue Springs has some internal issues. They hired a new coach when Kelly Donahoe left and went to Rockhurst. I don't think it's working out. I don't expect him to be there after the season's over. They've got good young talent, but it's not really ready yet. And the talent there's just something missing there. And I don't see that working out. And I hate to say that as a high school coach, but from what I'm hearing, and I live in Blue Springs, from what I'm hearing, I don't expect him back. Rockhurst is young. They've got a good sophomore class. They're getting a little bit better each week. I'm really excited to see the CBC game this week. I think that's kind of another measuring stick for them. For them to play, DeSmet even up 14-14 for a team that's really kind of offensively challenged. I thought that was pretty good for them. They lost 28-14. They're dangerous in the postseason, not necessarily deep run, but can beat somebody because they play good defense and they've got good size, and they've got a tailback who's really good. Class 5, we're okay here. We've got it's funny. I was looking at it on Tuesday night. I was looking at the districts, and last year Grain Valley and Platte County were really just teams that deserved to, made it to the quarterfinals, played each other for the second year in a row in the quarterfinals. Platte County made it to the Class 5 state championship game after making the Class 4 state championship game the year before. I fully expected that to happen. I thought Raytown would be a little better. They've not been as good, or they've taken some losses to some good teams that I thought they could win. I thought North Kansas City would be a little better. They can't find an offense. And now Platte County and Grain Valley are kind of sitting near the top of their districts, along with Fort Osage, who's okay. They only got one loss to North Kansas City, but I think that Platte County and Grain Valley have the thing that the other schools don't have. They've got outstanding defenses a year after they had dynamic offenses. So they're able to just grind you down and shut you down. And they've got enough offense to get things going. Grain Valley plays Raytown this week. That'll be a good test for them. And we'll see how that district shakes out. Class 4, we've got Smithville, and I don't know if anybody can touch them. I'm biased. I see them every week. They went to Raytown, who's big and athletic and a bigger school than them, and shut them out 34-0. They've got like 4 shutouts on their record this year. Platte County is the only team to score double digits on them, and that was 10 points in a 20-10 win by Smithville. I don't think anybody around here can touch them. Lincoln Prep is a great story. Went to Maryville and won last week. They play center here in a couple weeks, like next week to close out their season. The Lincoln Prep coach tweeted out that they went there 5 years ago for a playoff game to Maryville, and it was 48-0 after the first quarter. And he thought about taking his team off the field because he was worried about getting kids hurt. And he goes to kick a field goal at Maryville. And it's not the Maryville of 5 years ago, but it's still a pretty solid football team who has a good chance to go, kind of deep in the Class 2 because the districts around them aren't that strong. They get that win. Lincoln Prep's a great story. They're doing great things. I just think that they're going to go like this to Smithville. I think they're just going to run into them, and I don't know if they can beat them. And then in Class 3, we've got Odessa, and a team that, if we're not talking about them enough this year, we will next year as center if they stay in Class 3. They've got 2 losses to Baser Linwood over in Kansas. It was a 4A team. They're undefeated. They're number 2 behind Bishop Miege. They lost to them by 5 points in a game that was put together at noon on the Friday they played. And it was fantastic. And it was a great football game, 26-21. Both coaches, you talk to them afterwards, and they're like, there was no prep. It was go out, coach a game, adjust, and play, and let players make plays. And it was one of the best games we've had in the city this year. And that's their one loss. And then they went to Odessa last week. We're down 39-12 at halftime and lost 42-41. They've got a quarterback named Joseph Vick who put up 446 yards and 5 touchdowns against Odessa. Their tailback put up 200 yards rushing, a couple touchdowns, another 180 yards receiving. He's a sophomore. Quarterback's a junior. They have 3 seniors, and 2 of them see time. Almost everybody are sophomore and juniors at center. So they've got a good coach in Brian DeLong, who's taken them to the quarterfinals before, where they lost to a Maryville team that would go on to beat Burroughs with Ezekiel Elliott. And they've got players all around, and they put out talent. Malik Collins is playing for the Houston Texans, played on that 2012 team. Rashad White, who wasn't even good enough to be their starting tailback, is now the starting tailback at Arizona State. So they had a kid, Norvell Trent, was really good, never went to college. he was the starting tailback on that 2016 team. But center is a team to keep an eye on. They're in the same district as Odessa, so we could see a repeat of that. Class 2, and the other team is St. Pius, and St. Pius is out there as well, and they're having a really good year. Their only loss is to St. James from the Kansas side, and they brought back a lot of players off that team that went to the Class 2 championship game last year. So, if anybody's going to take out Odessa, I think it's center and St. Pius are probably the 2 biggest ones there. This is not the Odessa team from a few years ago. They're not very deep, but they still keep winning games. I don't think they know any other way to go play on Friday night. They haven't lost a regular season game in almost 4 years now. So it's going to be interesting there. Class 1, we've got, you go up to around St. Joe, you got Mid Buchanan and East Buchanan and West Platte and Penny. And they've all beaten each other by like a score. There's like a round robin going on up there. So I think that, and Windsor's kind of Sedalia. We don't really cover them. I don't know if anybody really covers them, but I still think they're a pretty good team. So we've got a lot of good teams. And I'd say if I had to look at what I think are the biggest heavyweight favorites, Liberty North in Class 6 is out there, and Smithville in Class 4, and then Odessa, just because no one's beaten them on a field in 3 years. So it's until somebody does, we've got to see that. I think they're vulnerable. I thought they might have lost this last week, but they keep finding ways to win football games. That says a lot about that team.
Class 6 here in Southwest Missouri. Of course, you had Nixon make a great run.
Mm-hmm.
A year ago, they lose by 3 points to, the eventual state champion there in Ray-Pec. They've got a lot of those guys back, but they lost a running back, Ramon Green, to a broken collarbone 3 weeks ago. He will be probably able to get back if they get to that district championship, but that'd be our only maybe Class 6 team. Joplin, I think, is pretty good, but they kind of got manhandled a little bit by Carthage, who I think in Class 5 is really good. And I know it's going to come down to probably Carthage and maybe a Jackson team out of South Central Missouri, or I'm not really sure where Jackson is, but it's over there somewhere. Boot Hill, okay, over by Sykeston. I think that's probably where it's going to go, and I don't know what that direction is. I don't know where they go as far as their districts and where they would match up, but Carthage is so good with Luke Gall, in the backfield. When he comes around the corner, if you're a corner or even a linebacker, you're going to have to make a business decision. Am I going to hit this guy and try and hang on, or how's this going to work? He's not the fastest, running back, but he just runs over people. And, Class 4, You've got West Plains down here. That's probably the best team in Class 4, but they kind of got manhandled a little bit by a Lebanon team who may be able to make a run, but they're going to run into that Carthage Webb City winner at some point when they come out of that district. They're at Lebanon, but they're undefeated. Coach Will Christian, one of my favorite guys, he does a tremendous job, but they're just so big up front, and they just eat clock and they eat clock. And, Class 3, where we've had some success here in Southwest Missouri with the Mount Vernons, the Cassvilles, the Monettes, there's just not really a standout team that I can think of in Class 3. Class 2, you've got Fair Grove, but they're in the same district with Lamar, and I don't think anybody's beating Lamar. I don't think there's a class. I think Lamar could maybe compete at the Class 3 level for a state title. They are just so good, and they just keep it rolling. Jared Beshore went in, took over for Scott Bailey, who left and went up to Jeff City. Now Scott Bailey is back. He's the assistant coach at Webb City. And that's just amazing that a guy with 8 state titles, would go in and be the assistant coach. That's like Nick Saban getting Urban Meyer, on his staff. So that's Class 2 would be, probably Lamar, Fair Grove. Class 1, you've got a Skyline team that played Valley Catholic, pretty well. They haven't won or haven't lost since then. They've got an opportunity here, I think, to maybe make a run, but the Windsor's in their district. And I think Windsor is just probably hands down the best team in Class 1 out of maybe Thayer. I haven't got to see Thayer this year, but that's kind of the breakdown here. And again, I'm just disappointed in the Class 3, now it's to kind of start. Everybody's, they got 2 games left. They're looking to see, how they're going to be able to, get to that 1 seed. And you're looking at that Skyline Windsor district. Skyline went out and they scheduled at Springfield Central, which is a Class 5 school. So they got the 40 bonus points. Windsor's going to be undefeated going into that game, having beaten Butler in a great game a week ago. But Windsor's going to go into that district as a 2 seed because of the points that Skyline's able to get by playing up. And I noticed, Dion, you wrote a story just a couple of days ago about, the district seeds and things like that when coaches start looking at it.
Yeah. And, you talk about Liberty North, they're on track to be the 2 seed in their district because they have a loss and they missed out a game. So a game they would have plus 13 Staley in. They didn't play that game because Staley had COVID. And so Park Hill South is just rolling along undefeated. And unless Park Hill South gets tripped up, Liberty North's going to have a hard time getting that number 1 seed. And I think if they played right now, I think Liberty North beats them by a couple touchdowns easily. And that's not, I'm not trying to denigrate Park Hill South, because if they just barely made it into 6 this year. If they were down in 5, I would like them a lot to be able to maybe compete with a Carthage or a Jackson, or at least to have a chance to get to a semifinal, depending on how the bracket shook out for them. But just in 6, there's just so much deep. You talk about Nixa, Joplin, they're in the same district with Lee Summit North and Ray Peck. And that's a brutal district right there. And I like Lee Summit North, and I think they're a good football team, but they have never gotten past a district final. I mean, they never have, not in the history of the school. They've been like 1 since the way the new tournaments have gone. And that was a few years ago against Rockhurst. And I think in that game, they were missing their starting quarterback, because the way they were constructed, they let the starting quarterback, who was like 6 foot, 165 pounds, touch the ball 40 times a game. And shockingly, by about week 12, he had a broken bone in his back because he played in the Suburban Gold. It's like, you can't. So I think they're a little bit more balanced, and they've got a lot more depth than they've had. And they're pretty good, but they've still got to step up and do something that they haven't done before. And then there's the Rockers and the Ray Pecks and the people like that. And you're right. Nix is good. Joplin's good. I mean, it's going to be a grind to get out of that district.
It is. As far as, coming up this weekend, Mr. Kvidahl, what have you got? What's on your radar? Where will you be? And what are some of the big games? I know you mentioned Sluitt, DeSmet. I think Hazelwood Central hosts Lindbergh. What's kind of on your radar right now?
Well, Friday night, I'm going to go over and watch East St. Louis play Edwardsville, because we cover the Illinois side, like Dion keeps his eyes on the Kansas side, being border towns. And that's kind of fun, because East St. Louis has allowed 2 points in its previous 4 conference games. They've outscored their conference opponents 242-2. And the offensive line was mad. They gave up the sack in the end zone for the safety. Otherwise, they would have shut out their conference opponents. And this conference is generally very competitive. I mean, in Illinois, you have to qualify for the playoffs, which means you have to finish 500 or better for consideration in a 9-game schedule. That conference usually gets 2 or 3 teams that are not East St. Louis into the playoffs every year. This year, they're probably going to get 3, with O'Fallon and Edwardsville being among them, including East Side, and they beat O'Fallon, I think 48-2, and they beat everybody else 68-0, literally. So I'm going to go watch to see if Edwardsville, who's traditionally really good, AJ Epinesa is a graduate, plays on the D-line for the Buffalo Bills, in case you were watching on Sunday with the Bills team. He was kind of chasing Mahomes around a little bit the other night. But the Tigers are, I'm going to see if they can put a touchdown up. And on Saturday, I am going to go to Hazelwood Central for that Lindbergh game. The Flyers haven't played up there since 2017, but they won at Hazelwood Central in 2017, which was a bit of a surprise. Coach Nathan Norman is I think in his 5th year now at Lindbergh, after coming up from Cape Central, where he had that program in a really good place. So we've also got MICDS playing a St. Dominic team who I think is a pretty good Class 4 program. We have them ranked number 9 small school in the area, and you know I don't know if they can stop MICDS's offense. Quarterback Reagan Andrew is just a spectacular high school quarterback. He's about 5'8", $158, $160. But he's a 4-year starter. He's made it to 2 championship games, and they put up 60 points on Lutheran North, whose defense was supposed to be pretty good. Now, obviously, when you have a D1 commit to Clemson transfer out, that changes your defense, but they've still got a lot of kids who are going to go play high-level college football at Lutheran North, and they gave up 60 for the first time in at least 20 some odd years to MICDS. So I'll go to Hazelwood Central, but we'll keep my eyes on what that score looks like at MICDS this weekend. And actually next week, East St. Louis is going to go play IMG Academy at a neutral site game in Mississippi. So I don't know if I'm making the road trip to Mississippi on Friday, but I really would like to if I could make it work, because I think that would be a hell of a lot of fun.
And Dion, what have you got kind of on your radar here this weekend?
Well, unfortunately, last weekend was you want a big game, we got a big game wherever you want to go. We had Odessa in center, we had Liberty North, Lee Summit North, we had Mid Buchanan, East Buchanan. You go on the Kansas side, you had 2 Blue Valleys that are really good playing each other, Bishop Miege, Blue Valley. I mean, you name it, we had great games all over this week. So not the worst week we've had, but it's still a pretty good week. And Liberty Ray Peck is a good one. Once when we were one of our we have our Remax Big 3 games that we do each week, and that's one of our highlighted games. And both those teams, I think, are just trying to figure out, you know, where they are in their progression. Liberty's won 4 straight since they lost those back-to-back games. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how both those teams do. Liberty's defense was kind of a work in progress to start the season. Ray Peck's offense was kind of a work in progress to start the season. So that's a good measuring stick for them. And then in Green Valley and Raytown, we talked about that earlier, they're playing for district positioning, you know, a conference title, if that really means anything to anybody anymore. And then those are 2 of our big ones. And then Park Hill South's got a game with a Lee Summit team that's won back-to-back games, has got good talent, is playing really well right now. And while I think the Park Hill South should win that game, I think they've got a little bit more size and better defense. That's going to be their last test before they get into the postseason in a district to where they're going to have Liberty in their district and Park Hill in their district that are all good teams that are playing that Suburban Gold. So those are kind of the big 3 games that we've got this week. And we've, like I said, last week was one of those that I think it's been a couple of years since I could look up and down the list of the 55 to 60 games that we have on our scoreboard on a Friday night between the 2 state lines. And there were, 8 or 9 that were good enough to be called the game of the year. And that's what it was last week. And they all pretty much delivered. Mid Buchanan, East Buchanan was a score. Odessa was a point, 3 points in the Liberty North game. You can't really argue about any of that. I mean, it was all pretty good games to watch. And I work in the office on Friday nights, so I'm kind of following scores. Occasionally we'll have a web stream or a game on, and I'm watching games on my computer as well. So there's some games I wish I knew that Jackson originally had an opening and then Smithville had an opening. I wish we could have just done that on Saturday in Columbia. That'd have been a fun game to watch, but Smithville's open this week. Ruskin had the COVID out on them, so Smithville's not playing this week. And there's a lot of good teams playing not very good teams in some other spots. So I'm probably like Dave is, and you guys are. When you get to week 8, it's like, can we just get to can we just get to 10? I'm ready to throw some teams in a bracket.
Oh no. Oh no. I can't believe we're at week 8 already. It goes too fast. We spent all year waiting for this, especially after last year where it was goofy, but around here at least. No, I pump the brakes. Let's keep going. Like it's still hot, for God's sake. It's still hot here.
It's gonna be like in the 50s in Kansas City tomorrow night. Like down.
Well, that means it'll be in the 50s on Monday here. Like
yeah.
I can't. It was 80 degrees yesterday. I'm in football practice talking to people and I'm sweating. It's like, this is ridiculous.
We're on the other side of that front, so we're already got the cool weather. We're gonna have baked potatoes for our scorekeepers on Friday night here at the house. That's how we do it.
Oh, outstanding! It's cooled off here now finally, but here in Southwest Missouri, got Camdenton's at Glendale, and Camdenton has completely revamped their offense from that power I. That they now throw the ball 60, 70 times a game. Glendale already threw it 70, 80 times. That game may not be over till Sunday. And, but that's a big game in the Ozark Conference. McDonald County adds at Nevada. And Nevada's kind of a surprise, this year. I believe they're 6-1 on the season. Their only losses to Lamar. And you got Warsaw traveling down and playing Skyline. And I think that's going to be a good game as well. But, and I probably ought to mention, when talking about Class 1, I forgot to mention Marionville, who's undefeated and won a state title in baseball a year ago. So they've had that taste, and just had Coach Grubbs on here earlier this week. And I don't want to pucker up half my constituency by forgetting to mention the comments out of Marionville. But gentlemen, I really appreciate this. This has been a lot of fun, and Dave and I have done this. This is probably our 3rd or 4th time we've kind of reached out, and I'm certainly happy that he put me in contact with you, Dion, and this has been kind of fun. I really enjoy it. Getting to kind of connect around the state, and we're not trying to sell advertising to the same people, and we're not, doing all that. It's just talking football and sports, and I really enjoy it. And you guys have obviously two of the busiest, high school guys here in the state of Missouri.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me. It's always a good time to do something like this, and here in Kansas City, me and Mick Schaefer, we do something like this once a week. He's at 41, was an old Metro Sports guy, and so we have to keep it. It's tough to keep that down to 30 minutes, and I'm sure if Dave and I were doing something like that, it'd be too. I'd call and ask a question, and we're on the phone for 40. Just
easy. No, it would be an hour at minimum. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I enjoy talking. And it's great to talk because you get to learn a little bit more about the places around the state, and that makes it better. And Dave's a part of the rankings voting, and we have our little online conversation, which has really gotten, I think, the last 2 or 3 years, we've got a great group and everybody's really participating well. And I think the rankings have been pretty strong the last few years. I mean, I know there's others who may disagree with us, but no, it's always fun.
Yeah, well, I get those calls every now and then. How did you rank? I'm not on that. I have nothing to do with that. I have nothing to do with that at all. But Dave, I know you've got to go, but I certainly appreciate you being a part of this. And maybe next week we can hook up again. And last week we had Bailey Harbit on, who is the KSN sports director down in Joplin. And she did a great job, and it's always a lot of fun. But gentlemen, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guy.
You bet. You're listening to the Missouri Sports Network, MissouriSportsNetwork.com, where everyone has a home field advantage. Back after this.